The prototype has been guiding us this entire time, not just watching, but waiting, using us to do exactly what it wants, and it's all a part of his grand master plan, which I'll be unfolding in today's video. So hey everybody, I'm Jeeps, and before we begin, there's one thing we need to really understand. Who is the prototype? Now, although many of you may have heard or seen this character many times in the past, there's no doubt this is one of the more mysterious villains in Poppy Playtime, as we haven't really seen them around much throughout the chapters. But from what we know, he is clearly the most dangerous of them all, not just because he possesses high capabilities of violence, but a keen sense of intelligence as well, allowing him to outmaneuver his opponents, as we see in the games. Now this plays a key part in the prototype's plans. Despite how dangerous and calculating he is, we've made it this far alive, and that alone raises a serious red flag, because if he wanted to kill us or stop us, he's had plenty of chances, and yet, here we are still moving forward. Chapter after chapter. It almost makes you wonder, is our survival really our own doing, or has something or someone been making sure we stay alive? Because what we're seeing throughout these chapters may not be a series of lucky escapes, but rather intentional. You see, from chapters 1 to 4, there's one message that gets repeatedly shoved in our face, and no, I'm not talking about the many death screens on your first playthrough, but rather the lack of control we have, and not to mention, the desperation of the situation we find ourselves in. In chapter 1, we came back to Playtime Cove for a reason, and we see it from one of the first screens in the game. We're given a note telling us the employees disappeared 10 years ago and that we need to find the flower. We follow these instructions and find ourselves getting to a point of no return, barely escaping Huggy Wuggy and having to face the many other creatures in the depths. Now, escaping Huggy Wuggy, that was a miracle in itself. Pure luck if you had to ask me. If the vents weren't organized as well, or if we lagged behind a second longer, Poppy Playtime would have been over in an instant, our character gone. But somehow, some way, we managed to survive. Now, I believe the prototype has a large influence in this, and don't get me wrong, our player is clearly skilled and has stacked miracles upon miracles throughout the chapters, especially with characters like Mommy Longlegs in chapter 2. But when it came to Catnap, for example, a character who is known for worshipping the prototype like he's a god, there were multiple moments in the chapter where our back was turned and we could have been killed easily, but instead we were given warnings, opportunities to go back or continue forward. Knowing the prototype's influence, our survival was most likely a key part of his plan to stay involved with not just his enemies, but our allies, which we find in chapter 3, and more importantly, us and Poppy. But I'll touch on that in a moment. And if you don't believe he was influencing the other experiments during these times, then sure. But consider how intelligent the prototype is, and the likelihood that we've been getting watched by him ever since chapter 1. Meaning that in any moment we could have been killed, but we weren't. And from what we've seen in the Hour of Joy, they clearly have the capabilities to kill us. They just have chosen not to. But of course this wasn't out of mercy, but rather purpose. The prototype isn't the merciful type either, and when it comes to characters like this, there is always a deeper meaning. Which brings me to my next point. The prototype has rarely appeared in Poppy Playtime, in fact only 3 times visually on screen, and more than once over audio, like VHS tapes and such, which contributes to his mysteriousness. But what's even stranger is the moments that he does appear. For example, the first time we see the prototype is at the end of chapter 2. Moments after we kill Mommy Longlegs, she falls onto the ground and the prototype reaches from under the door, grabbing and pulling her into the darkness. Or another instance, in chapter 3, right after we electrocute Catnap, the prototype descends from a vent and kills him as well. Do you see the pattern here? The prototype is repeatedly showing up here as we're about to kill the experiments. So this brings up 2 questions. Why is the prototype only appearing during these major moments, and why is he killing the experiments? And I believe we have the answer to both. For the first, the prototype appears in these major moments as like I said, he's been watching the entire time, keeping an eye and waiting for his moment to strike. And as to why he's killing the experiments, I believe the prototype was using us to do the dirty work, then proceeding to either collect their remains or finish them off personally. Because why do it yourself whenever you have pawns you can use to do the work for you? We've witnessed this from Catnap and Mommy Longlegs, and while you could argue that the prototype could have killed them off long ago, from these experiences we strengthened our bond with Poppy and Kissy, which in the end allowed the prototype to get even closer to us and everyone else. benefiting him in the end. So if you had to ask me, it feels like he's playing some form of 4D chess, manipulating everything like a mastermind, and letting us live was not a mistake. And speaking of manipulation, the prototype hasn't been playing it afar this entire time either. It comes down to a solid fact. As Sun Tzu once said from the book called The Art of War, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. This will be important very soon. In Chapter 3 of Poppy Playtime, we meet a variety of new characters, one of many being a young-sounding child named Ollie, who we only hear through a telephone. Now, when I saw this for the first time, I was already asking questions. How could a child be alive, especially since it's been 10 years since the Hour of Joy? And honestly, I don't know. I don't believe that's even possible, especially considering the dangerous circumstances at the factory and the characters we met along the way ourselves. And while they do seem friendly in the game, befriending Poppy and everyone else, at the end of Chapter 4, they are revealed to be the prototype in disguise. And if you don't know that yet, it's been 5 months since the release, so I guess now you do. The prototype was essentially using his voice mimicking abilities to stay close. Remember that Sun Tzu quote? Keep your friends close but your enemies closer? Well, that's exactly what the prototype uses here, and the result is devastating from what we saw at the end of Chapter 4.
As for you two, try to land on your feet.
And we saw this coming in Chapter 3 too, as a lot of theorists, including myself, took a look at Ollie and realized something just wasn't right. Not just the fact that they're a child, but we never get to see their face either. And all of this information links back to a Chapter 3 video I made connecting Ollie and the prototype, but now that theory is set and confirmed. So what does this mean for the prototype? Well, from everything we've seen across the last 4 chapters, it's clear. The prototype has been playing the long game. Slowly and methodically, he's manipulated not just us, but the other experiments around him. And if things keep going the way they are, then by the end of Chapter 5, he might be the last experiment standing. The true king of Playtime Co., if you will. Poppy ran, Kizzy's fate is unknown from what we saw at the end of Chapter 4, before the floor exploded, and us, we're exactly where he wants us to be, the labs, surrounded by poppy flowers. His plan worked perfectly, and in Chapter 5, we'll watch everything unfold. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this theory, check out this next one right here, and as always, I'm Jeeps, and I'll see you next time.